with light winds. Well, that's the end of today's edition of LWT Information. There'll be more next Saturday morning at the same time of 9:25. Once again, here's the address to write to if you're organising an event and you'd like it included in our What's On guide. LWT Information, London Weekend Television, Upper Ground, London SE99 6YW. That's LWT Information, London Weekend Television, Upper Ground, London SE99 6YW.
This autumn, keep in touch with London Weekend's features and current affairs programmes. The London programme uncovers life in the capital. From County Hall to Soho, our team of reporters discover the intriguing stories behind the headlines. For the moral perspective on contemporary issues, turn to Credo on Sunday afternoons. London Weekend's feature series give a deeper insight into the way we live. How should we tackle poverty? Why is modern London the way it is? Does the law work as it's meant to? Brian Walden provides in-depth coverage of national and international issues with Weekend World on Sunday at noon. With politicians in the hot seat or analysis of world events, you'll find out what's really going on. Exciting programs to keep you informed. Keep in touch with London Weekend Television.
When I tell people that I use herbal medicine in my own home, I often get odd looks. I think they think that I have to have a special garden full of green-growing plants and that I use a lot of complicated equipment. But in fact, for much of herbal medicine, you can simply use things that you have in your own kitchen anyway. For instance, garlic. If somebody has a nasty, chesty cough, I slice up 2 or 3 cloves and I put them in a cup, and then I put in some honey on top of that. And about an hour later, you have a sort of runny liquid, which doesn't taste nearly as bad as you might think. And a teaspoonful of that from time to time will settle most coughs. If you've let a cold develop, however, you can have a nasty sore throat. And for a sore throat, there's nothing better than sage. You take a few of the leaves, put them in a cup, half fill the cup with hot water and let it stand, and then strain it off and gargle. But if you don't have a garden or window box, you can get ordinary dried sage from a herbal suppliers. It's lovely crumbly stuff. You just take about that much, put it in the cup, just as though it were tea leaves, pour hot water over it, another half cupful, and let it stand in the same way and infuse, and gargle with it just as you did with the other way. When children can't get to sleep, I don't like to give them chemicals. What I like to give them is a cup of chamomile tea. And I have this cup, which is a herbal infuser, which they sell all over the continent for making their herbal infusions. It has an inner section like that. You just shake out a few of the chamomile flowers into it. Then you fill it up with boiling water, cover it, leave it for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then your tea is ready. You just take it out, drain it into that, and there is your tea. And if you have one of these, that's lovely, but they're not essential. You can make a herbal infusion in any ordinary cup. But if you don't happen to have dried chamomile flowers, and you don't have a local herbalist who can supply them, your health food shop will certainly have these useful little tea bags. They make them with chamomile. There it is, just a little tea bag. They make also with peppermint, which is lovely if you have mild indigestion. Another one, which is a great favourite of mine, is this mixture of lime and peppermint. Lime is very soothing and sedative, and peppermint is digestive, very, very soothing to the stomach. This is something I would never be without. This is witch hazel, and I keep a bottle of it in my fridge, because if you've fallen down and it's going to be a big bruise, lovely cold witch hazel is a nice remedy for it and very effective. It smells nice too, and children like the smell because it's a bit funny. If somebody in your house suffers from hay fever too, keep a bottle of this in the fridge in the summer, because when their eyes are getting all sore and stinging and they're sneezing all the time, a cold compress of this on their eyes is wonderfully soothing. But even better is tiger balm, which is sold all over the Far East, and which people from China and Hong Kong and Singapore absolutely swear by. It's an ointment made from a lot of these aromatic oils. It has a very powerful smell, and the smell of this could take your head off too. One fingerful of this, they say, rubbed into a forehead will be marvellous for a headache. But what they use it for most of all is any kind of muscular ache. So if somebody in your family has been a bit too active with their sport and they've pulled a muscle, or they've got a frozen shoulder, or they're just feeling a bit achy, try this, and it works wonders. And finally, I have what I call my healers, for any kind of cuts, bruises, burns, minor scalds. This ointment is made from two plants, marigold, which is here, and something which most gardeners would think of as a weed, St. John's wort. St. John's wort is very healing for all those cuts that involve nerve ends and can be exceptionally painful for that reason. Marigold is one of the best healers in the business. They're putting it into skin creams a lot in France as they discover more and more about how it works. This is a lotion, tincture of calendula or marigold, and if you put a few drops of this in some boiled water, it's a very safe wash for burns as well as soothing and healing, for minor burns that is. And this finally is comfrey ointment. It's made from this plant with the fat green leaves, and if a child has a really messy graze and knee full of gravel, you can just cover it with this and it'll take away the pain and the hurt in no time at all. So you can see a herbal medicine chest doesn't have to be much more complicated than the ordinary kind from the chemist, and I personally find it a lot more effective.
One of the things that everybody likes to do is to collect spring herbs and dry them and put them in amongst folded linens and stored clothes in order to keep them fresh. Things that everyone's familiar with that are used for these purposes are things like lavender. But my favorite uses of herbs for beauty are connected with hygiene, and they consist of making infusions for washes and so on. Everybody, I think, knows the use of chamomile for blonding hair. But what we do in Italy on the feast of St. John, mothers and children go out in the fields and pick every single flower that's blooming. And they come back loaded with this fragrant smelling heaps and heaps of flowers. And they infuse the whole lot in hot water. And then the little ones, right up to the biggest, are all washed in this essence of spring flowers, which clears away all the dirt and whatnot that might have accumulated during the winter when they were all sewn up in their clothes. It was too cold to wash. And there they all are, new and spanking clean, ready for the summer, smelling of spring themselves.
All fragrant flowers and herbs contain one common element, that is their aromatic essential oil. This is present in minute quantities in the stems, flowers and leaves of all those flowers and herbs. It will take approximately 20 kilos of lavender to actually distill 1/2 ounce of lavender oil. This fragrant oil is still retained by the plant even when it has been dried. It's quite simple to dry your own flowers and herbs at home. And the technique is simply to collect fresh flowers and herbs and lay them out thinly onto newspaper or tissue in a warm, dry place. An airing cupboard's perfect. And after a few days, depending on the heat, you'll find that they'll become nice and dry and completely crisp. It's best to try and use fresh blooms, and always remember to try and collect on a dry day, otherwise they'll go mouldy. And they'll always hold their fragrance and colour like that. But if you can't be bothered to dry your own at home, then you can always go to most herb stores and get a wide selection that are pre-dried. Lavender is perhaps the best example of a fragrant herb that's easy to grow, will grow anywhere in the country, is readily available, long-lasting, and has so many uses around the home. The most basic use of lavender is simply to place in bowls around the home, and when passing, just crush the flower heads between your fingers, and you'll release that fragrance. And that's exactly the same process as used in the lavender bag. Now, the classic mixture of flowers, herbs and spices is potpourri. And if you want to make it at home, let's use some flowers and herbs that we've got here. Take pink rosebuds, just add a few of those, and red rosebuds for colour. And then just say, for colour, marigold again. And more for fragrance, some lavender. Now, that's quite a simple way of producing what you would class as a potpourri. But the thing about a potpourri is that you have to have a strong scent, a strong fragrance, and that is added by a few drops of an essential oil. I have here jasmine, but it's up to you what sort of oil you use. If you particularly like other essential oils like sandalwood or lavender, then you can add those. And you'll need about this much, about 6 drops for that amount. So the idea is to just drop in gingerly the essential oil and give it a good mix so that it spreads through the mixture. Now, the other ingredient you're going to need is ground orris root, which is the root of the Florentine flag, which is ground into a powder, and you'll need about a teaspoonful or a pinchful for that amount, which you just sprinkle over the mixture and then again work in. Now, that mixture has to be left for up to 2 to 4 weeks in an airtight container so that the essential oil is drawn into the mixture and is fixed by the orris root so that it becomes a very strong fragrance. And then when that's ready, you can take your mixture and you place it in pots and leave that around the home. And that really is all there is to a potpourri. There's always a fascination about herb pillows, but they're really quite simple to make at home. And all you really need is a mixture similar to the potpourri mixture, but maybe with a few more drops of essential oil added to give a stronger fragrance. All you'll need is a small muslin bag in which to put the herbs, and you'd fill the small bag with the herbs. You don't have to fill the whole of the pillow, as some people think. And then you would sew the bag up so that the herbs can't get out. But for speed, I'll just here stick across the top of the bag. There's the fragrant sachet. You'll also need the pillow itself. And here I've put a zip in the end of the pillow so that you can take the cover off for cleaning. But the inside is just an ordinary pillow filling with a hole made right in the centre where you're supposed to put the fragrant sachet. Then zip the pillow up, wait till the fragrance permeates the fabric, and there you have a herb pillow. Something else that appears quite a lot in gift shops and herb stores nowadays is the Elizabethan herbal soap ball. Now, these are expensive and quite difficult to make, but a simple version can be made at home. All you'll need is a bar of a pure white vegetable soap, which can be bought at most chemists. Do ask for a pure vegetable soap. And that needs to be grated into a bowl. I've already done some in there. And to make a smooth, creamy texture to your soap, and also to act as a soothing element to the soap, add a teaspoonful of oatmeal. Now, we're going to add the fragrance and the essential oil, which will give it the purity, which I'm using here lavender oil, but you can use any essential oil. Just add 6 to 8 drops into the bar of soap. And then you'll need about a 1/4 cup of water, enough to turn the mixture into a workable paste. Now, what you're producing here is an absolutely pure product. So this mixture will be very beneficial for people that maybe have skin problems or allergies. There we are, it's beginning to work. Now, you have to take the ball when it's ready and leave it to dry for up to 1 week in a cool, dry place. Don't try and put any heat near it like an oven, otherwise it'll crack. Now, when it's ready, there you have an Elizabethan washball.
I think if most of us cast our minds back only a few years, we'll remember that herbs in general were not used widely even in the cooking field. But of late, almost every aspect of our domestic use seems to have been impinged upon by herbal something. And one of the most dramatic examples of this is surely in the field of cosmetics and shampoos. It's imperative to understand that when you're talking about the keeping qualities of a natural product, you're talking about the need for a preservative of some sort. A modern commercial product has to have some form of preservative in it. Historically, a whole range of gums, unguents and resins, like myrrh, were used to keep things for a longer period of time than they would normally keep. I've just undertaken a small experiment in which peaches and strawberries have been subjected to 2 approaches. The one has a liquid menstruum, liquid base, with a few drops of gum benzoin as a preservative, and the other is exactly the same but without the preservative. They've both been left under the same conditions for 2 or 3 days, and this is the outcome. The one without the preservative is riddled with microbial growth. Now, what does this mean? Well, if cosmetics are manufactured without precautions, individuals may apply to their skin an infected material in a case in which the skin has been damaged in some way, particularly importantly in the case of a burn, and this is why a commercial preparation does include a preservative in it. The overall lesson and story of this is that natural products are safe when used appropriately, when used with some knowledge of what you're doing. But natural products can also have a degree of danger unless these simple precautions are taken.
Now, my own rule, as far as I myself am concerned, when I'm making my products at home, is never ever to put anything on my face that I wouldn't be prepared to eat. So begin by always using fresh, natural products and treat them with a great deal of respect. Now, we've already briefly shown you an experiment about how difficult it is to preserve your own products at home. So I'm going to show you a way around that and talk about how to make an essential oil, because an essential oil has none of those problems. Now, essential oil is present in the woody aromatic plants most noticeably, like rosemary, for example, but it's also present in things like thyme, lavender, sage, any of the strong smelling herbs. Now, I'm going to show you how to make your own version of this, although when it's commercially made, they use steam distillation, so they produce a much stronger product. First of all, you collect the rosemary when it's flowering, and at this time of year we're making it a little bit early, but flowering is the best time, and pick off the leaves individually. So you have a sprig of rosemary, and you're going to take off the leaves and just leave the stem, because the oil is actually trapped in this point which is the calyx right down the bottom here. So take off the leaf as close to the stem as you can. And you want to chop it up first because rosemary is an extremely woody, tough, leathery type of plant. And by chopping it up, you're beginning to break up the oil cells in the plant. You don't actually have to use a fancy piece of equipment like this. You can simply use a wooden board and a sharp knife. Although, of course, if you're doing that, be prepared for the rosemary to fly around the kitchen a bit. And, of course, I hardly need add, mind your fingers. Now, the next thing you're going to do is use a pestle and mortar. And I have a rather special one here, which is a Japanese one called a surabaki. Special because of the grooves, which make an even better job of pressing the oil out of the plant. Although there again, of course, you can use an ordinary pestle and mortar, but be fairly vigorous. Now transfer your rosemary into your pestle and mortar, and then give it a really good pound. And you can smell the oil being released from the plant. This smells absolutely beautiful. Now what you're going to do next is transfer this rosemary, which is now fairly finely pulped, into a jar. Now depending on how much you want to make, you choose a large or small jar, and you fill it a third full. And now you're going to pour over a natural oil. Now any natural oil will do. I've chosen here virgin olive oil, which simply means it's from the first pressing, and so it's the finest oil that you can get. And that's my own particular preference, but you can use sunflower oil, safflower oil, or if your purse will stretch to it, you can even use almond oil. But please don't use any petrol oil or liquid paraffin, because that is no good for the skin at all. Don't use mineral oils. Now you're going to fill up the jar, so it's 2/3 full, and you're leaving a little space at the top, and I'll explain why that is in a minute. And then you're going to add a few drops of cider vinegar. Now you can use white wine vinegar, but please don't use malt vinegar. It's far too harsh for the skin. And I've got a little dropper here, which is worth investing in because it only cost me a few pennies at the chemist. And put in 4 or 5 drops of cider vinegar. Put the lid on and shake it very firmly. Now the purpose of the cider vinegar is to help to break down the vegetation so that the oil really gets exuded into the surrounding oil. Now do remember to label it and put the name of the herb, the month in which you made it, and also the year in which you made it, so you can identify it at the end of 3 months. Now you remember me saying leave a little gap? That's simply so that there's plenty of room in which to move the oil around the jar. And I want you to put this away in a warm place. I use an airing cupboard, and keep it there for 3 months, and every time you go past, give it a good shake. Now the actual making of that didn't take too long, in fact, but it's well worth your while financially, because that little jar will make about 50 mils of oil in the long run, which is about the amount contained in this bottle. And this bottle would cost you, if you bought it commercially, something between 12 and 15 pounds. Now, how do you find out, you'll be asking at this stage, when the oil is strong enough? I want you to get your oil out of the cupboard and give yourself a little pulse test. And I obviously can't do it on that because it's freshly made. This is some oil I made last year, and if you put it on your wrist and just smell it, the fragrance of essential oil of rosemary will come through extremely strongly. So that will tell you when it is ready. And then you decant your oil into coffee filter paper, which is put in a funnel to get rid of all the rosemary, and you have a pure clear oil like this, which you put in a brown or an amber bottle, and that's very important to protect it from the light and to protect it from air as much as possible, so that it retains its essential healing properties, and it also retains its beautiful fragrance. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about its very many uses. First of all, you can use this concentrated rosemary oil as a bactericide and disinfectant. And to do that, you put 10 drops into a large tumbler full of water and gargle with it, and it'll help to get rid of any germs in your mouth, and it'll also help to sweeten your breath. You can add 10 drops to a couple of pints of water and use it as a hair rinse, and just keep pouring it through your hair over and over again. It's a beautiful conditioner, and it really brings out the luster and the sheen of dark hair especially. Now you can also use rosemary oil in a toner, and a toner is something you apply externally on the skin after you've cleansed it to really tighten up the pores and refine the skin. And generally, of course, you only use it on your face and on your neck. So put a few drops into a tablespoon of wine. Now wine sounds very odd as a toner, but red wine is very good for dark skins because it's rich in tannin, and dark skins also tend to be rather greasy, so it'll help with the greasiness. And use white wine for light or fair skins. Now don't use sweet wine because that's too high in sugar and it'll feel sticky on the skin. Use a dry white wine. And you can simply pat that on the skin, leave it, and then add your moisturizer on top. Oh, and by the way, one more use, a general use for rosemary oil. It is said to be an aphrodisiac, and I don't know about that, but it is indeed very stimulating, used externally on the skin. So for the sort of days where you simply cannot get it together and you haven't got any energy, put 10 drops of essential oil of rosemary into a warm bath and lie there and have a good soak and massage the oil into your skin from the top of the water as you lie there, and it will really get your circulation going. Now that is just some of the uses of this very versatile oil, and this is only the first exciting step to making a whole range of beauty preparations yourself at home. And there are many, many recipes on the market, all sorts of books you can get hold of, providing, please remember my caution, you follow the instructions implicitly and you use extremely sterile hygiene conditions.
TV Times has published this magazine to accompany the television series Herbs for All. It's available by post from ITV Books, P.O. Box 50, Market Harborough, Leicestershire. Cheques or postal orders should be made payable to ITV Books for £1.35.